Charter schools have been an important innovation in public education, and President Obama and the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, are supporting the expansion of charter schools as a major component of their education plan to race to the top. Last year, there were 44,000 applications to get into charter schools in New York City. There were 8,500 seats for them. That represents 5 applications for each seat that was filled. The current waiting list for charter school admissions now stands at 40,000. It's important to note who these students are. 62% are African Americans compared to New York City's school population of 32%. 30% are Hispanic compared to the city's school population of 39%. 70% of New York charter school students are eligible for free or reduced lunch, which is approximately the same number as students in conventional city public schools. The results on the most recent statewide math and English language arts exams are spectacular, both in terms of absolute achievement and in comparison to other students, both within the New York City school system and statewide. You can see these results in greater detail in the fact sheet that I've handed out to you. This year's math scores show a significant reduction in the racial achievement gap. Although over 90% of New York City's public charter school students are African American or Hispanic, charter schools in New York City achieve proficiency rates nearly equivalent to white students statewide, with nearly 91% of charter school students scoring proficient or better to 92% for white students statewide. This is a dramatic narrowing of the achievement gap. And that's the platform for introducing our first speaker, Senator Malcolm Smith, who, in addition to his many achievements in Albany, was a founder of Peninsula Prep, the first charter school in the Rockaways, is a member of the Board of Trustees of Merrick Academy, Queens Charter School in Jamaica, Queens. Senator Smith, it's an honor to introduce you as our first speaker.
Thank you. We'll start out, as I normally do, and tell you my brief story about how magnificent charter schools are and how sometimes it takes a little while for people's understanding to grow about how and what they do in terms of impacting our young children. And the story goes like this, and it's factual, and it's true. When I was pursuing public office, I had a group of parents that followed me around throughout my campaign that said, you will never get to be an elected official because we are going to vote against you and campaign against you as long as you support charter schools. Make a long story short, I was blessed. I got elected, and a lot of other stuff happened, but the same number of parents that were fighting me, there was a couple of hundred of them, quite frankly, that were fighting me and saying you can't do charter schools because of all the challenges that it poses to the public school system, still was fighting me. But the fight had changed. After a year or two of the school that was open with Steve Klinsky and his team and Merrick Academy, those same parents were pissed at me because I couldn't get them into the charter school. No one wanted to believe that. I said, no, it's a lottery system. They said, no, we know politics, you can make it happen. I said, no, I cannot. I said, it's a lottery system, but if you put your child on the list, we'll be happy to do so. And quite frankly, that was part of the motivation and the impetus to how we started Peninsula Prep, because there was such a demand for the schools now, which stand at 701 and several hundred in another. It's just absolutely incredible. And just as was stated earlier, one of the things that are exciting, yet it's quite humbling, if you will, is when you go to the lottery, as I did up in Harlem last year, where the gymnasium was packed, and I'm talking 4,000 or 5,000 people, And it was exciting to see that so many people have recognized the significance of charter schools and what it would mean to their children's education. But the part that drew the heart part of me and made me sympathize was that there were so many of them that were not going to get into that school. And though we had a wonderful announcement about $30 million that we secured for the charter schools, the challenge and the problem was so many people walked out of there crying because their son or daughter could not get into the charter school. It was that moment that every now and then you have an epiphany in life that you know you have to begin to shift the paradigm by which you manage yourself. And it was at that moment that I told myself that I would continue and would never fight harder for anything other than charter schools, especially increasing the cap. And I would tell you, as an audience who I believe is committed to charter schools, who understands the importance of it, that notwithstanding what is going on in Washington versus New York in terms of the cap and how most people think we may not be able to receive or get supportive money from Washington because of our challenges, I would tell you that will not stand in our way, and that you will not have a stronger fighter to make sure that we will pursue and receive all the money that my good friend Secretary Duncan has told me on a number of occasions will happen. I am thoroughly committed to this cause. I have moved a number of my colleagues in both houses toward a direction that I think we will be very proud of in the near future. And you should know that as long as I am in the Senate and as long as I have colleagues who believe in everything that this organization stands for, that we will have a successful year. We will not have difficulty with facilities. We will be clear about the cap is not a threat. And then you will know that future lotteries will not have children walking away in tears of sadness, but in tears of joy, because they all got their names picked because there'll be enough slots available for all of them. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
Our next presenter, Edward F. Cox, has a history of national public service and service to the state of New York as a trustee of the State University of New York and chair of the Charter School Institute.
The Charter School Institute started in March of '99. Because of my background with inner city schools, I was asked to co-chair with Randy Daniels, who had done a lot of inner city economic development. The key decisions and policies then, first of all, we decided that we would have charter schools up and running in 6 months. We started in March. By September, we'd have our first schools up and running because we knew there were groups like Sisulu-Walker that were ready to go. The amount of work that had to go into that was tremendous, and James Merriman will tell you what we had to do with Scott Steffi getting out the application and getting the responses to the application. And we decided in this process we would have a very small but very competent staff. And just to get it done, we had to bring in outsiders. It was terrific. Outsiders to help us take a look at all the applications, measure them, and decide which of them were the best. And we still use that process, small staff supplemented by outside experts in charter schools, looking at the schools that we would authorize. We're very careful to take the attitude we're administering a law. We're administering a law. We don't have any politics of our own here. The law has its own policies embedded in it, and we administer the law. That's it, period. And we move forward that way. And the law really asked us to take a look at schools individually, one by one. Were they properly structured? Had the kind of board that you needed in order to become a good school? The Charter School Institute wouldn't be what it is, which is one of the best authorizers in the country, if it were not for those executive directors and their staffs. The trustees, however, got fully involved in it. We had policy retreats at crucial moments when we had to decide what does the law say and how do we implement it. We got involved in board interviews. Anyone who was involved in a charter school knows what the board interviews are like. After all, the application's only an application. It's the people, it's the board that's is responsible, as a fiduciary responsibility to implement the charter. So the interview of the board and getting the trustees involved in it became a very important piece of it. And when there were defalcations and things like that early on, the trustees made sure that we got the right people involved to investigate the schools and make sure that the right result, made it clear these are public funds, they're going to be used for the charter schools, nothing else, period. The result, we now have 18,000 students in 58 charter schools authorized by the Charter School Institute. That is only, however, 0.6% of the 3 million students in New York State in K through 12 education. So how can they have an impact? How do charter schools, and even if we have all the charter schools that you would hope for, Senator, it's only going to be a very small percentage. And the fact is that it's more by example. This is what can be done in education, K through 12 education. On the renewal process, 20% of the schools that are up for renewal have not been renewed by the Charter School Institute. We've been very tough on that. If you don't live up to what you say you're going to do in the application, you don't get renewed. And as a result of that, and I think the authorization process in the English language arts scores, as I think Harvey pointed out, the 80% of the schools are at or above proficiency, as opposed to 61% in the districts. In math, it is 92% as opposed to 76% in the districts where the schools are. And the interesting thing is, that's for all the schools we've authorized. The ones that got renewed are about the same, and 78% as opposed to 80%, just a little bit less, and it's 92% same in the math scores. So the fact that we've been very tough on renewals, to the schools that are coming up to renewal, they know that if they don't perform, they will not get renewed, and therefore they are working hard to accomplish what they said they would in their applications, which are their charters. We are a charter school institute, and we are not charter school authorizer. By institute, we always plan to have another tier, which would be a policy tier, which would be the place at the State University of New York where anyone who's interested in charter school information could come and get it. And so Jonas is starting now we have named the Policy, Practice, and Research Center of the Charter School Institute. And we're taking the information that we have as authorizers and information that we can gather from all the other sources around the country about charter schools, and hope that the Charter School Institute will become the center for studying about charter schools and for best practice with charter schools, how authorizers should authorize charter schools, etc. That's the exciting new development at the Charter School Institute. Bottom line, charter schools are here to stay. From President Clinton to President Bush, to President Obama, they have all been supportive of charter schools, going back to Governor Pataki, to Governor Spitzer, to Governor Patterson, and of course Dave was there at the start. That's where I first met him, way back when, I mean, before he was governor, before he was a minority leader. He was right there, fighting the good fight for charter schools. Charter schools will set the example, and they're also a tool for districts. Joel Klein and James Merriman and I, after he had been a chancellor for 3 months, we visited with him and talked to him about charter schools way back when. And being an old trust buster, Clinton, you know, he's head of Clinton's in the Justice Department, he's head of the Antitrust Department division of the Justice Department under Clinton as a lawyer. So he immediately recognized what a good tool for improving education charter schools could be, and how they could help break up the monopoly of what he was supposed to be head of as chancellor, how charter schools could act to create competition and better practices for all his schools. So it bothers me a little bit that other districts haven't taken to it as much as New York City has, because charter schools are a wonderful, wonderful instrument that every superintendent around New York State should be using in order to improve the schools in their district. So that's the bottom line of charter schools. Thank you very much.
It's an honor now to introduce our very own board member, Steve Glinsky, whose leadership in the corporate sector is matched only by his commitment to children throughout the country. He has transformed the lives of many children far beyond Sisulu-Walker, New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, and it's through his vision and continuing commitment that we know the charter school will continue to be strong.
Exactly 10 years ago this morning, I was standing in the doorway of the Sisulu-Walker School on 115th Street in Harlem with a 5-year-old boy named Carter. Sisulu-Walker was the first charter school to open its doors in New York State, and Carter was the first kindergartner to arrive, and so together we rang a school bell to welcome in the charter movement in New York. Now, what have the last 10 years taught us about charter schools and education reform? What lessons can we learn? I think the first point to always remember is the fundamental importance of the issue at stake and the conditions that existed in New York and New York's public schools 10 years ago when charters began. I first started going up to Harlem in March of 1999 to work on Sisulu's application. Amadou Diallo had just been shot a month before. Racial tensions were running very, very high. The Public Education Association had also just issued a report talking about the so-called New York educational dead zones. These were neighborhoods like Harlem and the South Bronx, where only 38% of third graders could read at grade level, and an estimated less than 18% were on track to ever earn a regular four-year high school degree. To me, the charter school movement is not against anyone or anything. It is for giving all kids a quality education and a fair chance at life. And the issue is a human rights issue, and it is an absolutely fundamental one. The second point I'd make is that back in 1999, there was every reason to expect the charter movement to fail. Charter schools in New York have always sought out the toughest educational challenges, not the easiest. Charter schools can't pick their students the way a magnet public school can. Charter schools are very closely regulated and can be shut down if they don't succeed quickly. And funding at charter schools is much less than for other public schools, particularly when the lack of funding for a building is considered. So 90 charter schools took the New York State math and ELA exams last year. 73 of the 90 outscored their respective school districts on the ELA, and 74 of the 90 outperformed in math. There are now over 4,500 charter schools nationwide, serving over 1.4 million children, and as you've heard, President Clinton, President Bush, and President Obama now all agree that the charter school movement is the right one. I'm happy to say that Victory has seen some similar success at the schools we work with. So, for example, by the time that kindergartner Carter's class graduated Sisulu-Walker as fifth graders, 90% of them were at or above grade level on the ELA, about 2 times the nearby schools. And last year, 100% of Sisulu's third graders were at or above grade level on math, 100% at grade 4, and 92.8% at grade 5. At Malcolm Smith's Merrick School, approximately 99% of third graders were at or above grade level in math, 96% in grade 4, 98% in grade 5, and 100% in grade 6. And at the Yonkers Charter School, started by Eddie Laguerre and others, 100% of the graduating sixth graders passed the ELA and 95% passed math. But the fourth point to explain is, why do charter schools work when they do work? Is there something magical about the law? Is there some magic curriculum that charter schools use? And I'm now convinced that it's none of those things. Rather, I think it's, first of all, about the people and leadership at the charter schools who are allowed to participate in public education reform. And second, I think it's about the ability of charter schools to change and evolve more quickly than traditional districts. The New Covenant Charter School in Albany is a very interesting test case. New Covenant is a charter school that opened in 1999, very soon after Sisulu, and it struggled for 7 years. Between 2006 and 2009, however, the ELA for New Covenant's graduating sixth graders jumped from 42% to 71%, and the math score jumped from 27% to 88%. It's now the second highest performing sixth grade in all of Albany, including regular and traditional public schools. New Covenant graduates now far outscore the Albany district, and the school as a whole outscores most traditional public elementary schools in Albany, and hopefully the scores will continue to rise. But what's interesting about it is that New Covenant is a unionized school and had the same union and the same rules in 2006 and 2009. It had essentially the same teachers. It had the same students, so if they had self-selected in, they had self-selected in back in 2006 as well as 2009. It had the same building. It never received any foundation support or special help or grant. And the change was really all in New Covenant's leadership team. To me, the key to the charter school movement is that it expands the pool of talent, of human talent, able to work on school reform. Charter schools can evolve much more quickly than a traditional large district or board of ed can. So weak charter schools will fail to attract parents, or they'll be shut down by the regulators. Good ones flourish, multiply, and improve. And as the New Covenant example shows, scores and success can change very quickly. So given these lessons, what public policy should be pursued for charter schools in the future? First, the cap on charter schools should be eliminated. Charter public schools should be allowed to increase in number for as long as they outperform the traditional public schools in the neighborhoods they serve. Again, it's a fundamental question of fairness and civil rights. Second, charter public schools and traditional public schools should receive the same funding, including real estate funding. Charter schools are state-regulated, state-approved public schools, and it is morally indefensible to have two public schools serving the same population on the same block and give one thousands of dollars more per student than the other. Third, some charter schools achieve success with philanthropic grants from foundations and with free classroom space from the Department of Ed, and these schools should be commended because they still probably have less funding than a traditional public school. But what is really amazing to me is when a charter school achieves terrific success with no charitable foundation support and with no free classroom space. And I believe these self-sufficient charter schools deserve much more study, attention, and respect as the best role models for sustainable success and replication, the winter wheat of the charter movement. All strong charter organizing groups and structures should be welcomed in New York State if they result in better educations for New York students. Right now, if Columbia's medical school or the New York Times wanted to start a group of charter schools for science or for journalism, they couldn't. Each school would have to be under the control of a separate board who would hold the charter instead of them and who would be absolutely free to ignore all of Columbia's or the New York Times advice. And of course, the New York Times is a for-profit newspaper, and so it would be doubly disqualified. All that should really matter is what will produce great results for students in New York. And fifth and last, weak charter schools should be closed, but they should not be closed if the students would be sent to traditional public schools that are scoring even worse than the charter school is. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this movement and to address you all today.